In today's video, I want to show you how you can build a high-end dining table without the high-end price tag. The material that I chose to use for this build are the 2x6 by 92 5/8 KD from Home Depot. I like these because they are supposed to be kiln dried, but just be cautious, not everything is completely dry. I like to look over my material and then figure out which ends are going to be the best, and then I like to use my track saw to break everything down so it's a lot easier to mill. When I'm breaking everything down, I like to leave it probably about 2 to 3 inches longer than its final dimension. Just gives me a little extra wiggle room for splits, cracks, chips on the ends of my boards. I have a jointer and a planer, so I am using those to flatten and smooth out all of the edges on my board so they are all the exact same thickness. If you do not have these tools, because I know a lot of people do not, you can do this build without it. You can put everything together with pocket holes. If you do have a jointer and a planer, I like to face join all of my boards, edge join them all, I plane them, and then I rip them all down at my table saw, like you can see here. And now that I have all my boards milled, I'm going to lay them out here and rearrange them to get the best orientation and get the best face up, and also make sure that my grain orientation is alternating, as you can see here, up, down, up, down. And now that I have all of my faces selected, I'm going to write I-O on all of my joints. And this is what is called the in and out method. This is really great to get yourself a seamless joint when you're gluing up. Basically, you take every board over to your jointer and you take just a one pass on each one. The I goes inside against the fence, the O goes outside away from the fence. I do have a separate video covering this, so I will link that here. I'm going to be adding some dominoes here to make the alignment that much easier to sand and keep it flat. If you don't have dominoes, a biscuit joiner works as well, and if you don't have either of those, this isn't a necessary step for the durability and strength of the tabletop. This just helps keep everything completely flat when you're gluing it up, so that way you have less sanding to do at the end. Now I'm going to set up for the glue up. I like to try to do an even amount of clamps on the bottom as on the top, so I've got 3 here on the bottom and I'll do about 3 or 4 on top. The glue that I like to use in the summertime is Titebond 3. Titebond 3 has a longer working time, and in the summer it's hard to do a glue up without everything drying as you're gluing it up. It doesn't look like that long, but this probably took me about 15 to 20 minutes. I believe the recommendation on the bottle for glue time is after 30 minutes you can unclamp it and just don't stress the joint, but I personally like to leave all my glue ups for quite a few hours, if not overnight. Now I'm not going to bore you with a long ass sanding video, so I'm just going to give you a quick little clip of how I like to sand. I do the pencil method, mark over my entire workpiece with a pencil, and I start sanding until all of the pencil marks are gone. I usually like to start about 80 or 120 grit, going all the way up to 220. I like to use Serious Grit sandpaper. I am an affiliate of theirs. You can use code Gerber10 for 10% off, and I will link that down below. I get a lot of slack from all the keyboard carpenters out there for using a track saw, but this is probably my favorite tool in the shop. When you use it, make sure you take a few passes when you're cutting through your material. Saves on the saw and the blade. I'm going to be installing some C-channel on this tabletop. I do this on all of my tables, but it's especially important on something like this where there's a pretty high probability that this tabletop will warp because it is lumber from your local home store. C-channel is a great thing to use, and it keeps your tabletop dead flat. I make this little jig out of 1/4 inch MDF and double-sided tape. Gets my router bit lined up perfectly on there. Then I use some threaded inserts, lock that all in place. If you want a more in-depth look at how I install my C-channel, I'll link that video below. Now I don't love the thickness of a 2x4, it's like barely 1 3/8 inches I think, so what I'm going to do here is take my 2x6, rip it about in half, and then I'm going to laminate all of these together. I know people enjoy when you share your mistakes that you make when building, so basically I cut all of these and laminated all of these together and kept filming it, not realizing that I cut these all to 30 inches, which is about the standard height of a dining table, but the table that I'm making is going to be a bar height table that's 36 inches, so basically I had to remill, recut, and re-laminate all of these pieces together to get the length that I need. And now you can see here, those look a little bit longer because those are the correct pieces. And now I'm going to cross cut one side, flip it over, butt it up to my stop, and then cross cut the other to get all 4 of my legs cut to the same exact lengths. and anytime you're making repeated cuts, you want to avoid moving your fence at all until you're done making all of your cuts. So that's why I pulled out my other miter gauge and I took the first pass on that side and then slid it over to the other side and hit the stop block and got it cut to its final length, so I didn't have to move my fence. Now I'm going to be cutting some more of these 2x6s down to about 2.5 inches. I'm going to make 8 of these pieces that will connect the 4x4s to the stretchers. I'm using the flip stop on my miter gauge to get 8 repeated cuts at 10 inches. I'm going to use my combination square and set the depth to the exact center point of the thickness of those 10-inch pieces that I just cut on the table saw. Marking those lines will get my domino in the exact same place on all of my legs. Now that I have the legs all mortised out, I'm going to add this center attachment onto my domino. What this does is allows me to get my cuts perfectly in the center of all of my pieces, and since these pieces and the 4x4s are the same thickness, they'll line up perfectly. I like to shave a little bit off the sides of my dominoes. It helps them just fit in a little bit easier without having to use pliers to remove them. Then I test the fit of my pieces on the 4x4 and they were perfect. Something I've recently started doing a little bit more is pre-gluing my dominoes into some of my pieces before I do the entire glue up. It makes it a little bit less stressful. You don't have to glue up as many pieces all at the same time and worry about your glue drying. If you do this, just make sure you clamp your dominoes in place, and I like to use a toothbrush to get any excess glue out to make sure that your joint sets flush. Now I'm going to need to make the stretcher that will connect both of the leg assemblies together. To do that, what I did was I took a scrap piece of wood and I snuck up on the miters until they were both the perfect width of my connector pieces. Now that I have my template, I'm going to trace that onto the stretchers and slowly sneak up on those lines as well. One thing I realized would be probably a little bit easier is I took both of the stretchers once they were cut, stuck them together with double-sided sticky tape, then made the last couple passes while they were together, so that way each of them were exactly the same. Now that I have all of the pieces cut, I'm going to mark out the spots for the dominoes and drill those out. Once I have all my mortises drilled out, I'm going to glue up the stretcher and the connector pieces for the legs separately. Getting adequate clamping pressure was a little bit tricky, so what I did is I made these little cauls that have a 45-degree cut on one side and a 90-degree cut on the other, and then I attached them using some heavy-duty double-sided sticky tape. I left those cauls on the stretchers for when I attached the legs, so that worked out great. I definitely recommend mapping out your glue ups, pre-gluing your dominoes, gluing the connector pieces to the stretchers. All of those things made this build go a lot smoother. Once I'm done sanding, I'm applying my finish. The color that I'm going with for this one is Ebony from Varathane. Whenever you're staining a softer wood like pine, alder, poplar, any of those, you're going to want to make sure and use a pre-stain conditioner. What that does is it helps prevent blotching and helps you get a more even coat on the wood. I like to apply my stain very generously and then go over with a dry paper towel or rag and wipe away all of the excess. Another thing to make sure that you always do is stain both sides at the same time. You never want to put a finish on one side and not the other because that could cause some serious cupping. To attach the base to the tabletop, I'm going to be using threaded inserts. I'm using this jig to make sure that I get all of them in the same exact spot. Now that I have all of the spots marked, I'm going to recess the hole about a 1/2 inch with my Forstner bit and then drill through the rest of the material with my 3/8 inch drill bit. And now that I have all of the holes drilled in the table base, I'm going to set it in place and then do that same process using my 1/4 inch Forstner bit to mark out where all my threaded inserts are going to be going. Now that everything's laid out, I'm going to use my Forstner bit to drill out all of the holes for the threaded inserts. The inserts that I'm using are 3/8 inch inserts with a 1/4-20 thread. Once I had the table completely assembled, I sprayed it with 3 coats of a matte polyurethane to protect it. Please let me know in the comments what you think of this design and this style. I think that this turned out really amazing for using just some inexpensive materials from your local home store. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Maybe let me know what other videos you'd like to see me make, and we'll see you on the next one.